some things you need to know about mobile equipment. So one of the things is that inherent provision has to be made so the machine's not operated at a source skin distance less than 30 centimeters. And you'll find that there's an exception to that. We'll talk about that. Couple more things. These are from Title 17. And then it's impossible to energize the useful beam of a mobile fluoroscope unless the entire useful beam is intercepted by the image receptor. Not a problem these days. Early units, you could actually disconnect the two. They don't allow that anymore. So Title 17 urgently needs revision. A friend of mine up in Sacramento who does their regulatory stuff, Philip Scott, is working on it. He's been working on it for 3 years. The other problem is that the feds, a lot of the federal stuff got incorporated in, so there's a lot of stuff that's disappearing. So the regulatory situation for radiology right now is not easy, but we'll go through this. All right, so for fluoroscopic equipment, we're going to talk about source skin distance again. This is from 21 CFR Part 1020.32. So these are what the manufacturers are held to. So the first one, Title 17, that's California. They kind of have limited knowledge. The feds are for what they tell the manufacturers, are a little more complete. So again, we used to have means shall be provided to limit source skin distance to not less than 38 centimeters on stationary fluoroscopes, which is no longer an issue. Not less than 30 cm on mobile and portable fluoroscopes. Okay. In addition, for fluoroscopes intended for specific surgical application that would be prohibited at the source skin distances specified in this paragraph, provisions may be made for operation at short source skin distances, but in no case less than 20 centimeters. So what this says is that the units where I showed you the picture of where there was no extension cone, it was just kind of a little hump on there. That was a special unit that was made for doing surgery, so that basically is allowed to meet the 20 cm, really, kind of, sort of. The mini C-arms especially are made for 20. Okay? So you have to be real careful when they buy these things. It has to be very specific that the unit was designed for doing surgery or that it has a removable cone. When you take that removable cone off, then you can meet the 20 centimeters. Okay. Otherwise, it's 30 on mobile and portables. And on the stationaries, yeah, it is 38, which is, I don't know, 32.2, 2.5 divided by whatever the math is. 12 inches, something like that. So you got 3 different things. So, let's see, this is another one. The feds go into all sorts of good stuff. So now you have a different one. After June 10th, 2006, having a maximum source image receptor less than 45 centimeters. So these are your mini C-arms. They only have a maximum source to image receptor distance of 45 cm. So now you have to limit the source skin distance to not less than 19 centimeters. And again, if that's made for surgical operations where that doesn't work, then you're allowed to have down to 10. That's pretty close. So, and then of course the manufacturer has to set forth precautions. Of course, nobody pays, what you're going to see clinically is nobody pays attention to precautions. So that's kind of what you have. So you've got the 38 cm for fixed, 30 cm for regular mobile, 30 if it's for so 38 for fixed, 30 for mobile. The mobile is intended to use in surgery and 30 cm is not workable, then you can use 20s. That's one set. That's for regular. Then for the mini C-arms that have an image receptor to source distance less than 45 cm, then you have a source to skin distance not less than 19 centimeters, unless that causes a problem surgically, and now you can go down to 10. 10 cm is pretty close. Now again, these systems function, as I said, at microamps, not milliamps, but they do function at like 80 and 90 kVp. So it's just something to be aware of. This is actually what a newer OrthoView mini C-arm looks like. It's already pre-built. It's intended for surgery. That's why they call it OrthoView. So you already have the built-in 10 cm SSD, a 45 cm SID, and then you have an arc depth of about 19 inches. Obviously, this is only for looking at cast work and small parts. Feet, ankles, hands, fingers, wrists, forearms will work, elbows will work. Never seen a knee done with that. I suppose you could. Might stress the limits of the tube though. Okay. So let's talk about what the regulatory situation is. This is what you're going to be functioning under for most of your career. It does change, but for most of your career. So this goes back to the original California Health and Safety Code. It says, you can read, but basically they looked at people who were using X-ray and decided people needed to be trained. So, and that included physicians. So this was back in, Health and Safety Code, I think this goes back into the 60s. California, by the way, was the second state to implement training for radiologic technologists. New York beat California by, I think, a month, putting in those rates. So this is where they established standards of education, training, and experience for persons who use X-rays on human beings, and to prescribe methods and means for assuring that these standards are met. Unlawful for any licentiate of the healing arts. Now, be warned, licentiate, automatically you think of, oh, that means a doctor. No, a licentiate can be defined by the state as anybody. For example, physician assistants had recently been designated as a licentiate and able to use fluoro. That happened, let's see, I retired in 2016. That happened in 2014, that regulation went into. So we mostly think of a licentiate as a physician, but it can be, in California, it can be a physician, it can be a chiropractor, it can be an osteopathic person, it can be a physician assistant, types of things. It's unlawful for them to administer or use diagnostic, mammographic, or therapeutic X-ray on human beings after January 1972 unless the person is certified pursuant to the various sections that deal with the different certifications. Now we go back to Title 17. Title 17 is regulation, Health and Safety Code is law. So as we talked about before in a previous lecture, you have a law and then you need regulations that explain the law. The legislature doesn't really have the ability to write details into their law, so the law is pretty, you will do this, and then they give it to some regulatory agency to decide how they do whatever this is. Okay? So this says you have to have a fluoroscopic supervisor and operator permit shall be required of any licentiate of the healing arts who does one or more of these things: actuates or energizes fluoro equipment, directly controls radiation exposure to the patient during fluoro procedures, or supervises one or more persons who hold radiologic technologist fluoroscopy permit pursuant to section 30451. So this is the current state of affairs. This is why when you're going to go up to surgery, you have to verify that the surgeon operating the C-arm or giving you direction has a fluoro permit. What has been suggested, the regulations I believe are out for They're looking at the vote. I don't think it's out for public review yet, but the legislature did pass, I'm still waiting to hear if the governor signed it, something that said basically, ready, any physician. If you're a physician in the state of California, you basically have to say, hey, I'm a physician, and the state of California will let you use x-ray. No test. No test. They have to take a test now. A one-time fee. It's still open as to whether they're going to require continuing ed or not. But those were all big issues for physicians. Their thinking is that they don't need it. My response to the letter I sent to the state when they asked for comment was they are the people who need it the most. Anyway, so that's the current where it stands. You should have a list from your department that gives you a list of who the physicians are who hold permits, so you can verify if you go up to surgery to do a case that the physician, the surgeon doing the case, it actually has one. But that is subject to change. As soon as I know more, I'll let you know. This is your requirement. Again, if you position the patient, position the fluoroscopic equipment, or select exposure factors, you are required by state law to have a fluoroscopy permit issued by the department. So, if you expose the patient to x-ray in fluoro mode or do any of these things, then you need a permit. The problem comes with, what does this mean?
Anyone can do it.
How detailed does the positioning have to be? If you position the patient's rib cage by telling him to take a deep breath, is that positioning? I mean, it really gets that ridiculous. Positions the equipment. Does that mean you have to have a permit to roll it into the room? Connect it to the power? Selects exposure factors. So the fluoro regulations were not written very well. There's going to be a document we're going to talk about where the state goes through and explains the limitations of these things. Have restrictions. Now the restrictions are in law. You may not perform fluoroscopic procedures without a specific order from a supervisor and operator. So, the way that works in the facility is Dr. Smith wants an x-ray of his patient. So, under procedures within the department, even though the order goes into the patient's chart, the radiologist who's in charge of the department then basically authorizes that. There's usually a general order written somewhere in the department to deal with that. Okay? Technologists may not operate fluoroscopic equipment without appropriate supervision. Meaning what? They have to be in the room? Do they just have to be in the facility? Do they have to be close by and immediately available? These are all questions. Technologists may not use fluoroscopic equipment without written standing orders and policies for repeat spot films. And may never make a diagnosis based on a fluoroscopic image or any radiograph. Patients love to ask you to read your film. Every patient you do is going to ask, oh, what's it show? Is it broken? It's one of the feelings when you have to say, I'm sorry, that you have to wait for the physician to do his report, read the film, blah, 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 blah. And they look at you like you're stupid. What, you take these things, you don't know what they say?
And then they say, can I take a look at the image?
No.
Like they will see, of course, they will
Yes.
see everything there, yeah.
Say, oh, it's already gone. I'm sorry. Now, in your own future, once you're licensed techs and stuff, if you injure yourself and you go someplace else and get x-rayed, on occasion, if you let the technologist doing your exam know that you're also a certified tech, they may be willing to let you look at your images. But most places keep a pretty tight tight rein on that. They don't want you second guessing. Okay, so these are your restrictions. Okay. See, that was a fast lecture.